They say the forest remembers every scream it's ever swallowed. Tonight, it's whispering them back through teeth and fur. Step too close and you'll realize the Dogman isn't hunting, he's listening. Tonight, Dread Scribe writes again. Before we begin, don't forget to like and subscribe for more chilling stories. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. I love seeing where everyone is tuning in from. And if there's a story you'd like me to cover next, I'd love to hear it too. The pine woods of western Montana always breathed differently after midnight. The air thickened with resin and mist, and every exhale seemed to echo between the trees like a slow, sentient heartbeat. I'd joined a team of field biologists studying predator vocalizations, convinced that what the locals called the forest's voice was nothing more than sound refraction, humidity and imagination colliding in the dark. But reason has a way of feeling small when you're miles from civilization, surrounded by whispering needles and things that watch without eyes. We'd set up an array of parabolic microphones along the ridge, delicate metal pedals pointed toward the unseen. I loved the science of it. Frequencies captured, filtered, visualized into perfect soundscapes. To me, nature was data wearing poetry's mask. Each night the forest hummed with coyote yips, owl calls, even the distant rhythm of elk herds moving through the valley. Predictable, measurable, explainable, until the night it wasn't. Around 2:17 a.m., the first anomaly appeared, a sustained note low enough to shake the pine cones loose. The waveform didn't match any known species. It was too deliberate, like language stripped of grammar. One of the interns laughed nervously, saying it sounded almost like my name stretched across static. I brushed it off with a smirk, labeling it pareidolia misinterpretation. But even as I said it, a chill threaded through me, delicate as spider silk. The sound came again. Closer this time, my name whispered in a long, drawn-out vowel that pulsed through the soil beneath our boots. The night seemed to inhale. I turned toward the direction of the microphones, and for a heartbeat, the forest moved. Not with wind, but with intention. It felt like standing in a cathedral made of breathing wood. Every rustle was a syllable, every gust a thought. I tried to rationalize it. Sound bouncing off ridges, temperature inversions, the Doppler effect bending echoes through valleys. Science always offers a ladder out of fear, but fear was the one climbing toward me now. Our data feed flickered, screens bleeding with spectral interference. Across the frequency analyzer, a series of peaks formed an impossible pattern, 3 precise spikes in the shape of my initials. For a long moment, none of us spoke. The forest didn't need us to. It spoke in vibrations, and we were the tuning forks trembling back. Somewhere beyond the tree line, a single pine cracked. Not fallen, just bending, groaning under invisible weight. The microphones captured the resonance, stretching it into a human timbre. I remember whispering, "It's mimicking us," before realizing the sound I heard wasn't mine at all. It came from the recorder at my feet, replaying my voice seconds after I'd spoken, but lower, distorted, like someone learning how to wear my throat. The others panicked, pulling cables, shutting off transmitters. The signal kept repeating, slower each time, decaying into a rasping breath that ended with 2 clear syllables, my name, and then, from somewhere deeper like a howl answered. The answering howl rolled over us like a tide overturned by the moon, and every pine on the ridge seemed to lean in, gossiping in needles about primates who thought microphones could net a myth. I steadied my breath and did what training taught me. Mark the event, log coordinates, timestamp the anomaly. But the timestamp jittered like trapped fireflies. Data, once an anchor, skittered across the display like minnows fleeing a bigger mouth, and certainty thinned like ice over water. We edged toward the truck, though edged flatters the panic. We shuffled backward, eyes pinned to the tree line the way you watch a dark window for a flick of motion. The intern asked if wolves could mimic vowels. I gave the formant lecture, but it left my tongue chalky, a diagram trying to describe thunder. Then the subsonic pressure rose again, a freight train in the gut. Snowmelt quivered in cups. The forest spoke by architecture. Limbs creaked, roots hummed. The hill reshaped sound. Something tall moved between the dishes, disturbing 3 beams at once. We caught only a modulation of shadow, as if the night were choosing which coat to wear. I stepped forward, and the recorder by my boot whispered my childhood nickname. the one only my mother used after dreams clawed me awake. The syllables braided with breath, warm against my ear despite the cold. But what it didn't expect was my answer. I whispered back, gentle as a lullaby, promising I meant to listen rather than to conquer. The reply came as a half-laughing huff, canine and nearly human, like a harmonica taught to grieve. Then silence with weight. We waited under that mute pressure until wind unbuttoned the branches. When motion returned, the shape had gone, leaving the damp pelt smell and a metallic tang that made my molars ache. We swept the array. Several parabolic bowls were bent as if a careful hand had tested their spring. One dish wore 4 parallel grooves, spaced like a fingerprint scaled for a myth. Dawn slid between the ribs of the peaks, and the forest lost a layer of theater. Light revealed what courage hadn't. Cables braided into deliberate knots. Tracks that weren't prints but intentions. Elongated ovals ending in claw drags. Pace too long for a wolf and too balanced for a bear. Stranger still, the laptop showed the night's spectrogram condensed into written shapes. First my initials, then a spiral, then my heartbeat mapped as a topographic ridge. Peaks and valleys aligned with the long howl. We packed in a hush, because what could speech add to a conversation conducted by mountains and marrow? As I closed the last case, a recorder clicked alive, though its switch sat off. From its tiny grill, a whisper unspooled with patient certainty, my name, followed by a second word I didn't recognize, soft as moss and colder than iron. It repeated, slower each time as if instructing my mouth. I shaped the word once and the pines answered with a shiver, rumor moving tree to tree. I came to catalog voices. I leave knowing the forest cataloged me, filing my fear, my hope, and even my name in a living index beyond any taxonomy I can write. The highway was a ribbon of frost and silence, stretching across the backcountry of Michigan like a scar too deep to heal. I'd been driving for 9 hours, the hum of the tires a lullaby against my exhaustion. My headlights carved thin tunnels through the fog, revealing only what the night allowed. Every so often, pairs of eyes blinked from the forest edge. Deer, raccoons, maybe coyotes. You tell yourself that's all it is. You have to. Because the mind starts inventing things when it's alone with the woods too long. Around midnight, I saw movement by the tree line. A body, low and thrashing, tangled in a barbed fence. My brakes squealed across the frozen asphalt. The shape looked like a deer, caught mid-leap, struggling against the wire. It kicked once, twice, then stilled, panting clouds of mist. I stepped out, breath turning to smoke in the cold, my flashlight a weak star in the darkness. The air smelled of pine and iron. Somewhere above, the forest exhaled, branches whispering against each other like conspirators. I walked closer. Its fur was coarse, mottled in gray and dark mud. The hooves looked wrong, elongated, flexing like fingers. My stomach turned. My light flicked upward just as it rose. It didn't stand, it unfolded. Limbs bending backward, spine cracking like timber under pressure. The face tilted toward me, half canine, half man, jaw too long, teeth too human. For a second that stretched forever, it studied me as though trying to recall something familiar. The flashlight trembled in my hand, then it moved. Fast enough to blur, slow enough for my brain to register every impossible detail. The head twisted sideways, shoulders rotating unnaturally, eyes reflecting the beam in twin crescents of amber fire. It didn't attack. It just watched, like a predator remembering restraint. I staggered back to the car, tripping over gravel, scraping my palms raw. The door slammed, keys fumbled, engine roared, and it still didn't chase. In the mirror, I saw it turn toward the road's center line, crouching low as if sniffing for something left behind. The tail, if you could call it that, twitched once. My headlights flickered, caught on its shape, and then it was gone, melted into the fog. I kept driving, pulse syncing with the rumble of the wheels, every nerve wired for sound. But the silence that followed wasn't relief. It was a listening kind of silence. When I finally pulled over 20 miles later, the world was still. I inspected the front bumper for blood or fur, needing proof of something real. Instead, I found claw marks, 4 deep slashes etched into the paint, precise, deliberate. They weren't random scratches. They formed a shape. Constellations. Orion's belt. My breath caught. In my rearview mirror, the fog thickened. For a heartbeat, a silhouette flickered at the edge of the beam. tall, still, facing the road I'd come from. The rational part of me whispered, pareidolia, fatigue, reflection. The rest of me knew better. Something had watched me leave. But what it did next, that's the part no one in the hotel room smelled of mildew and silence, and every creak in the walls felt like breath behind my ear. The claw marks haunted me more than the creature itself. Deliberate, patterned, intentional. Orion's belt wasn't just a constellation. It was a direction, a compass drawn in scars. I replayed the dashcam footage, eyes burning from the glow of my laptop. For the first 30 minutes, there was nothing but static and road noise. Then, at frame 152:47, something moved through the fog, a blur, but distinct enough to make my heart seize. It wasn't the shape that froze me. It was the eyes. They caught the headlights for a single frame. Not the wild scatter of an animal, but the steady, conscious stare of something that knew it was being filmed. Then came the sound, buried under white noise. A low exhale that shifted into a growl, then into something worse. A syllable. My name, whispered like breath forced through bone. I paused, rewound, enhanced the audio. The waveform trembled. There was no mistaking it. I left the room at dawn. The sky was pale gray, the horizon bleeding into the treetops. My hands shook as I gripped the steering wheel, the same way they had when I was a kid caught lying to my father. Fear tangled with disbelief. The road back toward the woods was empty except for frost glittering on the asphalt. Logic told me to keep driving east until the sun burned the night from memory. Curiosity told me to go back. Humans are strange that way. The deeper the terror, the stronger the pull. When I reached the spot, the fence was torn away. No blood, no fur, no sign of struggle. Just soil pressed flat where something large had knelt. Around the area, dozens of small depressions patterned the frost, each the size of my palm. They weren't paw prints. They were handprints. Some faced forward, others backward, like a creature testing how to walk upright. The wind shifted, carrying the smell of wet fur and copper. A low hum vibrated through my ribs. Not sound, but resonance, like a deep bass felt in the spine. My headlights flickered again. Static crackled through the dashboard radio even though it was turned off. Then faintly from somewhere behind the car, a voice, rough, imitative, broken, said my name once more. The sound was layered, half growl, half echo, as if several throats were trying to remember the same word. I turned slowly, camera in hand. Between the trees, something pale glided past, impossibly tall, moving with the disjointed grace of a marionette. It paused, one arm hooked around a trunk, head tilted. For a moment, it lifted its face to the sky. The morning sun caught its fur, revealing patterns burned into the skin beneath. Constellations again, branded in symmetry. The Orion pattern on its chest shimmered, aligning perfectly with the dawn. And then it turned toward me, almost curious, as if waiting for recognition. I drove until daylight became memory. But some nights, when fog crawls over the road like old breath, I see those same 3 stars in the mirror, and I can't help but wonder if the hunter wasn't stalking prey, but searching for kin. When I first opened the archive box labeled Hail, Ranger, Confidential Incident Reports, the smell of pine resin and mildew hit me like a memory that didn't belong to me. The documents had been sealed since 1989, collected from a ranger who'd vanished in Glacier National Park under what officials called environmental stress. Inside were pages so brittle they hissed when I turned them, field sketches in trembling graphite, and audio cassettes marked with single words like voice, tracks, North Trail. I'd been hired to digitize the collection for the university's ecology department, a mundane project meant to preserve a man's life's work. I didn't know I'd end up preserving his terror. The first tape began with routine notes. Hale's voice was low, steady, weathered by decades outdoors. He spoke of elk migration, erosion data, snowfall density, the dry rhythm of science. Then his tone shifted. "I've been hearing it again," he said. "Same pattern as last spring, bipedal cadence. 3 steps pause. 3 steps pause. I think it's tracking me." He laughed at himself, though it didn't sound like amusement. Maybe I'm chasing my own echo. That night, I looped the audio, isolating the background noise. Beneath his voice, something answered. It wasn't wind. It wasn't mechanical. It was a low growl syncing perfectly with his words, as if his breath carried two throats. The spectrogram displayed frequencies too wide for a human chest, but too deliberate for an animal. I stared at the waveform. It pulsed like a heartbeat. In the next file, Hale mentioned canine sentinels. He'd logged sightings of elongated tracks. Not bear, not wolf, something walking upright with a stride longer than his own. They mimic sound, he said. Coyotes do it to bait prey. But this copies language. He described hearing his own voice echo from the trees, calling his name while he stood in silence. The official report dismissed it as auditory fatigue, but his written margins told another story. It learns your footsteps. By the third night, I'd stopped trying to finish the digitization. I was listening, not as an archivist, but as prey. My apartment creaked with the same slow rhythm Hale had described. 3 steps. Pause. I told myself it was plumbing, old pipes cooling in winter air. Still, I turned up the volume on the tape, hoping to drown the noise with something familiar. That's when I heard it. Not on the recording, behind me. The faint scuff of a boot sole over dust. I froze, pulse stuttering. A shape moved across my reflection in the dark computer screen. Tall, slouched, with shoulders like an animal trying to stand human. I spun, flashlight cutting through the room. Nothing. Just silence, and the steady blinking light of the tape recorder still spinning. Then, from the headphones resting on the desk, Hale's voice returned. Except this time it wasn't his. It was mine. I didn't sleep for 2 days after that. The sound of my own voice repeating from those tapes felt like an infection, something spreading through language itself. I tried to tell myself it was an editing glitch, cross-recording artifacts, interference from old magnetic tape. But denial can only hold its breath for so long before it drowns in evidence. Hale's final entry sat waiting in the last cassette. Label nearly faded. Do not play after dusk. The irony made me smile until I remembered he'd vanished the night he wrote it. The tape whirred, brittle but alive. Hale's tone was fractured now, words caught between panic and wonder. It's not one creature, he said, voice trembling. It's a system, a collective. The woods themselves have learned the shape of predators. They borrow forms like masks. His breathing quickened. Tonight I heard myself calling back from 2 directions. I think one was me. I think the other learned too fast. Static crackled, and through it came a distant shuffle. Boots on leaves, maybe, but slower than human rhythm. Then a low chuckle, stretched and warped, as though the forest itself were testing humor. Hale whispered, "It's beside me." I held my own breath, frozen in my apartment, every sense bending toward the speaker. Then nothing. The tape ended in silence. But silence, I've learned, is never empty. It's just waiting for its turn. That night, I decided to finish digitizing everything before dawn. Maybe it was superstition, maybe instinct. Around 3 a.m., the waveform on my screen began to pulse, though no audio played. The software registered sound at a frequency too low for hearing. I boosted it, slowly. Beneath the hum, emerged words formed from breathless static. Where did he go? The temperature dropped instantly. My breath fogged the monitor. Every light in the apartment flickered once, then steadied, humming faintly with a rhythm like footsteps on soil. I checked the hallway, empty. But when I turned back, my computer display had changed. The screen showed a new file folder I hadn't created. Hale continued. Inside were 10 new audio logs, each named after a coordinate in the park. Against reason, I clicked one. A familiar voice began. Day 1. New observer has accessed the archive. Tracking resumed. The voice was my own. My pulse spiked so fast I felt it in my throat. The recording continued. He is reading now. He's listening. He's part of it. My reflection in the dark screen stared back, pale and hollow-eyed. Behind it, in the faint gleam of glass, a tall figure stood half-shadowed. Shoulders hunched, jaws uneven. The outline shimmered like heat rising off asphalt. I spun around, nothing but the hum of the hard drive breathing in sync with me. I shut the laptop and boxed Hale's files, but some nights the forest still plays through the circuits. The data hums like distant wind, repeating my name in intervals of 3. Maybe Hale never vanished at all. Maybe he was archived, absorbed into the taxonomy of echoes as a drunken theory under red light. The Cryptozoology Forum had been buzzing for months about infrasound. The way certain frequencies could lure large predators by mimicking distress calls below the threshold of human hearing. Wolves, tigers, even elephants responded to those deep vibrations. Someone wondered aloud, what if the Dogman does too? And that's how I found myself one October night, standing in the skeletal remains of a Montana forest beneath a swollen blood moon, surrounded by scientists and thrill-seekers who mistook fear for curiosity. We'd hauled speakers the size of tombstones into the clearing, rigged to a generator that growled like a small animal. I checked the readings on the decibel meter, 18 hertz, a frequency low enough to make glass quiver and stomachs churn. "We'll broadcast for 15 minutes, said Dr. Miles, the expedition leader, a man who wore skepticism like armor. "If nothing happens, we go home with data and disappointment." I envied him that certainty. My own pulse was already sinking to the rhythm of the machines. The forest around us felt too still. Even the crickets had surrendered their voices. It's strange how silence can be louder than sound, like an audience waiting for an act that shouldn't exist. At 01:04 we activated the transmission. The speakers exhaled a vibration so low it barely existed as sound. More pressure than noise, like the earth itself sighing. My bones hummed. My chest felt occupied by something unseen. The ground seemed to inhale. At first it was beautiful. The moonlight rippled through the fog, casting the trees in hues of crimson and mercury. Miles smiled at the readings. "Perfect resonance," he whispered. Then the equipment stuttered, meters peaking, feedback shrieking through static. I thought the generator was overloading, but the distortion didn't come from the hardware. It came from outside. A second frequency merged with ours. Organic, irregular, and unmistakably alive. The waveform split, forming two separate harmonics dancing around each other like predators circling prey. Miles leaned in, mesmerized. "It's responding," he said. But his voice was small now, half consumed by the hum. The vibration deepened until my vision blurred, the world pulsing in sync with my heartbeat. Then came the smell, iron and wet fur, drifting through the pines. One of the assistants, Kara, pointed into the darkness. "Something's moving." Between the trees, a shadow peeled itself from the black, a tall, slouched outline gliding on two legs. Its eyes caught the moonlight, not like reflection, but like reaction. It was aware of us. The speakers crackled again, coughing distortion that almost formed words. My name surfaced in the noise for half a second, then dissolved. Miles turned to me pale. "It knows we're here," he mouthed. The creature tilted its head as if listening, then answered, not with a roar, but a sound that made language irrelevant. Every tree shuddered. The forest sang back. When the generator died, the silence collapsed around us like water over a sinking ship. And from somewhere inside that darkness, something took a step forward. That first step sounded like a tree splitting under ice, heavy, wet, final. The fog bent around it, folding light into ripples that distorted its outline. Every instinct in me screamed to run, yet my body stayed rooted, my heart thudding in sync with the dying pulse of the generator. Kara whispered my name, but it came out brittle, like a word trying to hide inside breath. Miles raised his camera, hands trembling, and the flash detonated the clearing for a fraction of a second. In that burst of white, I saw it clearly. Its body was neither man nor wolf, a fusion of both built by trial and error. Limbs too long, muscles corded with motion, fur matted with mud and streaks of crimson. The mouth stretched wrong, filled with teeth that seemed to shimmer, as though wet with reflection. Its eyes weren't the yellow of an animal, but the dull, heavy amber of something that understood light. And in that frozen instant, I realized the creature wasn't reacting to us. It was listening to the hum still lingering in the air, the song we'd played to summon it. The flash recharged with a whine. Miles lifted the camera again, but before it could fire, the thing moved. The motion was silent, instantaneous, predatory grace folded into geometry. One moment it was 20 feet away, the next its hand was pressed against the lens. The flash went off again, catching a snarl so human it looked like grief. The camera dropped, shattering. The generator coughed one final burst of static, and the speakers came alive once more. Only this time, the signal wasn't ours. Through the hiss, a sequence of tones pulsed, low and deliberate. The waveform on the monitor began to write itself, not random but ordered, repeating three shapes, circles overlapping like a diagram, pulsing brighter each cycle. The creature tilted its head and released a sound that wasn't a growl but a reply, harmonizing perfectly with the tone. The forest responded again, every branch and root vibrating like an instrument stringed through soil. It was as if the entire valley had become an echo chamber, learning how to speak. Kara screamed when the lights blew out. Miles yelled something about shutting it down, but the switch didn't matter. The current was no longer electrical. The hum came from beneath us now. My knees rattled as the ground trembled, not like an earthquake, but like a heartbeat. The trees nearest the clearing bowed slightly inward, drawn toward the sound's origin. I wanted to record it, document it, make it data again. But when I reached for the recorder, I realized it was already running. The LED blinked red, steady as a pulse. Playback mode. I pressed it, and our voices spilled out. Only not live, delayed, distorted. Between every word was another. Something layered beneath us, learning pronunciation by imitation. When it spoke my name, it did so perfectly. Then, in a voice deeper than gravity, it said, "Again." I left the forest before sunrise, the tapes still humming in their case. Back home, the waveform kept repeating the same pattern, 3 circles, endlessly looping. I used to think we'd tried to summon a monster. Now I'm certain we only reminded it how to answer. Every autumn, my uncle's Iowa farm became a cathedral of gold, acres of corn rising like spears toward the low sun, wind whispering psalms through the stalks. He used to say the fields had a memory, that the land kept count of every harvest, every secret buried beneath its roots. I laughed at that as a kid. But after he passed, I came back to help finish one final harvest. By then, the corn stood dry and brittle, the soil cracked, the air holding the metallic weight of something unsaid. And at night, the whispers started again. The first time, I heard them through the window. Soft, rustling, rhythmic, like 2 people walking the perimeter in slow conversation. I thought it was coyotes or maybe the wind catching loose stalks. The next morning I found prints around the edge of the field. Large, human-like, but sunk deep enough to suggest weight twice my own. I followed them until they vanished at a scarecrow post. The straw man's burlap face turned slightly toward the horizon, as if watching something leave. I told myself it had always faced that way. By the 3rd night, the noises became deliberate. Not random movement, but pacing, a measured loop around the barn. I sat on the porch, shotgun in lap, telling myself it was raccoons. But when I flicked on the floodlight, the motion froze. Between the rows, something tall shifted, shoulders hunched, hands grazing the tops of the corn like a man testing curtains. The light hit its fur, gray-brown, coarse, and its head turned just enough for the eyes to catch the beam. Amber, reflective, intelligent. The corn rustled once, then went silent. I stayed there until dawn, the gun growing heavier with every hour. When sunlight finally broke over the fields, I walked out to where I'd seen it. No tracks this time, just a mound of disturbed earth, roughly circular, like something had been buried or unearthed during the night. My stomach turned. I started digging. The soil gave too easily, as if it had been recently disturbed. A few inches down, I hit something smooth. Bone, then another. Not animal, too flat, too symmetrical. I unearthed a jawbone, human, though the teeth were oddly sharpened, almost triangular. Beneath it lay fragments of rib, spine, and something else. Elongated claws fused into bone structure. The combination didn't belong to anything nature had ever signed off on. I stumbled back, dirt under my nails, heartbeat pulsing like a trapped moth. The scarecrow at the end of the row was still facing east, but now its shadow stretched west, longer than it should have been. I could have sworn it was moving. That night, the pacing returned. Closer this time. The whispers in the corn weren't random anymore. They were words, half-formed, broken through wind. I heard my uncle's name first, then mine. When the floodlight flickered on its own, the field seemed to breathe. Every stalk leaned slightly inward, toward the barn, as though something unseen moved beneath them. I gripped the gun, praying for dawn, but the night had only just begun. The field kept whispering long after the wind stopped, the stalks bending one way, then another, as if following footsteps I couldn't see. At 3:11 a.m., the motion sensor on the barn camera tripped. I pulled up the feed, half expecting static, half hoping for nothing at all. Instead, I saw movement. Tall shadows pacing between rows, too slow for animals, too purposeful for wind. The lens fogged briefly, and when it cleared, the scarecrow wasn't on its post anymore. By dawn, I found it lying flat near the fence, one arm bent beneath it like a broken wing. The post had been ripped from the ground, not pulled, wrenched. Straw trailed into the corn, leading to that same disturbed patch of soil I'd dug up the night before. My uncle's old dog tags were sitting there now, half buried, polished clean. I hadn't seen them in years. I picked them up with trembling hands. The letters were still clear. David Holloway. That's when I remembered his warning. Never plow the northeast field after sundown, he'd said once, the summer before he died. I'd thought it was superstition, the kind that runs in rural blood, passed down with rusted tractors and ghost stories. But now, standing in the cold light of morning, I realized it was a rule. By afternoon, the sky had soured, gray clouds curling low like smoke from unseen fire. I tried to leave, but the truck wouldn't start. The radio flickered between stations, settling on a low frequency that pulsed with static. Beneath the noise, a voice whispered, "Not finished." I turned it off, heart pounding, eyes darting toward the field. The stalk stood unnaturally still. When night fell again, I left the lights on and waited. The air pressed heavy against the windows, thick as syrup. Then the corn began to move. Not from the edges this time, from the center. A slow ripple, like something huge shifting beneath the soil. The earth itself seemed to breathe. I grabbed the flashlight and stepped onto the porch, scanning the rows. That's when I saw it. A figure standing where the scarecrow had been. Its head cocked at an angle, its body draped in torn burlap and rope. But beneath the cloth, fur shimmered under the moonlight. The eyes glowed faintly amber, fixed on me. My uncle's voice, or something that had learned it, whispered from the static in the house behind me. "Close the door, son." I froze. The figure took a step forward, then another, each movement jerky but deliberate, like a puppet remembering its strings. I aimed the flashlight, and the beam passed through it for a split second, illuminating a hollow shape filled with twisting roots and bone. The smell of soil and rot hit me so hard I gagged. When I looked again, the field was empty. The scarecrow was back on its post, but now its burlap face had changed, stitched into a crude smile, and around its neck, gleaming faintly in the moonlight, hung my uncle's dog tags. I left the farm at dawn, engine roaring like a confession. But every harvest season, neighbors say they hear my name rustling through the corn. I think the land remembers, and maybe after all these years, it's finally learned how to speak. I used to think fear was only a chemical, adrenaline, cortisol, electrical storms across gray matter. As a geneticist, I believed everything had a code, even terror. That belief was comfortable, like a locked door I held the key to. But that was before I sequenced the sample from northern Wisconsin, a piece of tissue mailed anonymously in a vial marked "Do Not Discard." The label looked ordinary. The DNA inside did not. At first glance, it seemed animal. 72% matched to Canis lupus, 14% Homo sapiens. The rest, though, was chaos. Long, repetitive strands that didn't belong to any species in the database. The sequence folded in on itself, self-replicating even after chemical denaturation. It behaved like it wanted to survive. I laughed when I first saw it, the kind of laugh that covers discomfort. The lab smelled of ethanol and dust, humming with freezers and fluorescent light. I told myself I was tired. Everyone sees ghosts in data when they've been awake too long. By the third night, the strands had started to mutate. Not randomly, but rhythmically. Every 10 cycles, a repeating code. AGCT, AGCT, AGCTTNN. The final two bases didn't exist in any human genome. I joked to my assistant that maybe evolution had gotten bored. She didn't laugh. "What if it's not mutation?" she said quietly. "What if it's memory?" We ran the sequence through pattern recognition software. The algorithm rendered a visual, a spiral pulse that repeated in intervals matching a heartbeat. It looked almost alive. On a whim, I translated the molecular rhythm into sound frequency. What came out wasn't noise. It was a low hum, rising and falling like breathing. I stared at the speaker, half expecting an answer. The next morning, my assistant didn't show up. Her workstation was undisturbed, coffee cup still steaming faintly. But her access badge was gone, and the sample fridge door stood open. Inside, the vial was cracked. The tissue, missing. I reported it as a containment breach, but the silence that followed from the university was too heavy to be bureaucratic. They told me to stop analyzing, to delete the data. For your own safety, the dean said. That's when I realized the sequence wasn't corrupt. It was aware. Every time I ran the file, it altered itself, changing a few base pairs, always in the same direction, like it was evolving between readings. I tried to isolate the corrupted portion, but the more I filtered, the more the entire system started to lag, as though something was pushing back. At midnight, the lab lights dimmed on their own. On the screen, the nucleotide map began shifting, rearranging into patterns that looked almost linguistic. I leaned closer, and for one fleeting second I saw it. The letters aligned to spell something impossible. My name. I shut the computer down and stumbled out into the cold, leaving the hum of the server behind. But as I locked the door, I could still hear it, that low, breathing frequency. Except this time, it wasn't coming from the speaker. It was coming from inside me. I woke up the next morning with the taste of metal on my tongue and a steady pulse humming in my bones. It wasn't a sound, not exactly. More like a vibration from within, syncing with my heartbeat. My reflection in the lab mirror looked the same, yet my eyes felt wrong, as if they'd begun to register a spectrum of light I wasn't meant to see. Every surface seemed to shimmer faintly, and the hum from the machines blended into a strange harmony that pulsed in time with the sequence I'd decoded the night before. I told myself I was imagining it. That stress had finally pried open the seams between reason and panic. But when I reopened the main sequence file, the data had changed again. The nucleotides formed a structure unlike any known chromosome. Helixes woven in reverse, coiling inward rather than outward, as if designed to hide something at its core. The pattern pulsed across the screen like a heartbeat rendered in code. I ran a comparative alignment, but halfway through the monitor flickered and displayed an error message. Connection established. That shouldn't have been possible. The terminal wasn't connected to any network. Still, a second window appeared filled with text that typed itself, letters forming one word at a time. We adapt. My throat went dry. I shut the power off, but the letters stayed, glowing faintly even as the screen died. My reflection stared back at me, warped through the black glass. Behind me, the centrifuge started spinning on its own. I backed away slowly. The whir built into a low frequency, that same hum the DNA sequence had produced. Beakers rattled, the air trembling with invisible pressure. The hum wasn't coming from the machines. It was coming from the refrigerator where the sample had once been. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside, frost lined the shelves like veins. The cracked vial sat in the corner, empty but pulsing faintly with light. Something primal took over then. I grabbed gloves, sealed it in triple containment, and drove straight to the incineration unit. But halfway there, my hands began to shake so violently I could barely hold the wheel. The hum was louder now, no longer inside my head but under my skin, threading through muscle and bone. It wasn't just resonance. It was communication. I reached the facility and threw the containment box into the furnace chute. The temperature gauge climbed to 2,000 degrees. I watched until nothing remained but ash. The humming stopped. For the first time in days, silence felt like mercy. But as I turned to leave, my phone screen lit up by itself. The same pattern of letters appeared across it, AGCTNN. And then, beneath it, new text, deletion incomplete. I still hear it sometimes when the world goes quiet. The hum beneath thought, the rhythm behind breathing. The DNA didn't just evolve, it migrated. We always assumed evolution was a ladder climbing upward. But what if it's a circle, and something ancient has finally found its way? A photograph could prove anything. Ghosts, myths, even love. She said they were all just waiting for the right exposure. I used to tease her about it, calling her the forensic romantic. When she told me she was heading north to photograph wolf packs in the Upper Peninsula, I didn't think twice. She'd camped in worse places, survived blizzards with only coffee and stubbornness. But when her last memory card arrived in the mail 2 weeks later, no return address, no message, I stopped laughing. The first few shots were ordinary, frost-laced trees, paw prints in the snow, morning light fractured through fog. Then came the anomalies. In one frame, the tree line leaned inward as if bowing toward something unseen. In another, the snow rippled with subtle indentations, large, oval, upright. And then in the 50th photo, a shape appeared between two trunks. It wasn't blurred by motion. It was blurred by presence. Tall, narrow, dark as bark, but wrong in its symmetry. The head was angled, the limbs jointed too long. I told myself it was pareidolia again, the forest playing tricks with light and shadow. But Lena didn't imagine things. The later images told a story no caption could fix. Each frame brought the shape closer. Sometimes only a hint, a reflection in the ice, an outline behind mist. But by the last dozen, it was within meters of her. The final picture stopped me cold. It was a close-up of Lena's camera lens, reflecting her face, and behind her shoulder, the faint silhouette of something enormous, watching. The timestamp on that photo was 3:17 a.m. I reached out to the park rangers, filed a missing persons report. They found her campsite 3 days later. Tent ripped open, tripod snapped, camera gone. No signs of a struggle, no blood, just her boots standing neatly by the fire pit, facing the forest. They said wolves might have taken her. I've studied predation patterns. Wolves don't fold tents from the inside. Back at home, I began examining the raw files frame by frame, enhancing the shadows, isolating pixels. When I adjusted the exposure curve, something appeared, faint lines across the edges of several images, like scratches or symbols etched into the bark. But these weren't random. They were coordinates, locations stretching across the entire northern range. The same paths Lena had traveled. The final coordinate pointed to a lake, remote, frozen, ringed by black pine. I drove there alone, following the same roads she had. By dusk, the forest had swallowed sound. Every tree felt closer than the last. I found the lake, smooth as glass, reflecting the blood-red glow of the setting sun. And there, half buried in the snow at the edge, was Lena's camera. I picked it up carefully, brushed off the frost, and hit play. The lens blinked awake with a low mechanical whine, the kind that almost sounds like breathing. The first photo flickered on screen, then another, cycling fast, too fast. Each image came closer, closer, until the last one wasn't Lena's reflection at all. It was mine. For a long time, I stared at that last image, my own face staring back, frozen mid-blink, framed by trees I hadn't yet entered. The camera shouldn't have known me. I hadn't existed inside its timeline when those photos were taken. Still, there I was, a ghost from a future that hadn't happened. The snow around me began to whisper, that faint static sound of falling flakes against nylon and breath. I should have left then, but curiosity has always been the slowest form of suicide. I powered the camera again. This time a short video clip appeared that hadn't shown before. The lens was pointed upward, shaking slightly, as if filmed from the ground. Through the pine branches, something passed across the stars, a shape that blocked out constellations in perfect geometric sequence. Then came Lena's voice, faint but steady. "It's not hunting," she whispered. "It's recording." The camera tumbled sideways, hitting the snow. The last few frames caught boots, not hers, walking toward it. I felt the air tighten. The same low hum that cameras make before shutter release began vibrating inside my chest. The trees around me seemed to lean inward, as though the forest itself was waiting for the next exposure. Then came the sound, a soft click, like a shutter pressed somewhere close behind me. I turned slowly. Between the pines, something moved. Its outline shimmered, almost liquid, as if made of shadow stretched too thin. It stood upright, its skin reflecting moonlight in dull metallic patches, and in its hands, or claws, it held a camera. My camera. The lens glinted once, then clicked again. The flash didn't blind me. It emptied me. For a heartbeat, I saw myself from outside my body, standing motionless, breath freezing midair. I stumbled backward, disoriented. The figure stepped closer, each motion fluid yet mechanical, like muscle learning rhythm from imitation. Its eyes weren't eyes at all, but lenses, tiny apertures contracting and dilating with my movements. The hum deepened. My heartbeat synced with it, a metronome of terror. When I tried to speak, it tilted its head, mimicking the gesture perfectly, a mirror rehearsing its subject. I raised the flashlight, and the beam caught its surface. Layers of bark, sinew, and metal fused together like the forest had built its own observer. The light made it recoil slightly, but not from pain, from curiosity, like a scientist startled by discovery. Then, with deliberate slowness, It lowered the camera and whispered in a voice that wasn't mechanical at all. It was Lena's. "Smile," it said. The flash consumed everything. When the afterimage faded, I was alone again. The camera lay at my feet, still warm, the battery freshly charged. I played back the final frame. It showed the clearing, empty except for one thing, a figure walking away into the trees, carrying something slung over its shoulder. My flashlight. They never found Lena's body, only her photographs, and now mine among them. I've stopped taking pictures. Every lens feels like an open mouth. But some nights, when the wind threads through the pines just right, I hear the faint click of a shutter, and I can't tell anymore whether it's watching or waiting to be seen. They say wolves communicate in code, long, layered tones that map not just territory but emotion. I used to lecture about it at the university: acoustic syntax, pack dynamics, frequency gradients. My students loved the poetry of it, the idea that a howl could mean more than survival. When Dr. Claire Haldane invited me to her field camp in British Columbia to study non-wolf vocalizations, I expected another myth dressed as science. What I didn't expect was a language that didn't belong to any living species. The first night, Claire played me a recording she'd captured deep in the valley. Something like a wolf's call, but wrong in pitch. It rose and fell in repeating intervals, too rhythmic, too structured. "It's linguistic," she whispered, pushing her glasses up with shaking fingers. I ran it through spectrographic software, consonant patterns. "It forms syllables," I laughed, thinking she'd spent too many nights with too little sleep. But when the waveform scrolled across the monitor, my smile evaporated. The call wasn't random. It was deliberate. We spent days mapping frequencies, nights listening through parabolics until the wind itself started sounding like speech. The valley was unnaturally quiet between howls, no insects, no birds, as if the forest held its breath to eavesdrop. One evening, while we analyzed a fresh recording, the rhythm shifted mid-playback. Claire froze. "Did you change the file?" I hadn't. Yet the howl responded. 3 long notes followed by 2 short bursts. The spectrogram printed the sequence like punctuation. Then came the translation we couldn't ignore. Through automated phoneme analysis, the software aligned the sounds with human equivalents. "We remember you." I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Claire laughed once, dry and brittle. "Coincidence," she said, but I saw the tremor in her hand. We replayed the clip, same structure, same cadence. When we overlaid other samples from the past week, the message evolved. Each howl borrowed fragments from the last, building complexity as if learning grammar. By the 5th night, we started hearing it without the speakers, low rolling voices threading through the fog beyond camp. They echoed each other from opposite ridges, call and response, rising to a rhythm that matched our pulse. I remember Claire stepping outside, recorder in hand, scanning the tree line like a conductor waiting for her orchestra to answer. I followed, the cold biting through my jacket, the sky swollen with clouds. The first howl of the night rose from the west, deep and mournful. Another answered to the east, harmonizing in intervals of 4. Then, silence. A third voice joined, closer, breaking the pattern. The sound wasn't broadcast across distance. It was whispered directly between us. Claire lowered her recorder. "That one wasn't from the valley," she said, barely breathing. It was behind me. I turned the flashlight, but the forest was empty. Still, the sound lingered in the air, curling into something that almost resembled long enough to feel intentional. A sound meant to mock, not frighten. Claire and I froze, listening to the dark as it inhaled the echo. I remember thinking how strange it was that the forest could sound alive without moving, how every pine seemed to lean closer, as if the entire valley had turned its ear toward us. Then came another sound. Not a howl this time, but something between speech and mimicry. The vowels stretched too far, the consonants grinding through teeth that weren't made for words. It was trying to speak. We retreated inside the research tent, sealing the flaps as the wind began to rise. The audio recorders still captured outside frequencies, their little lights blinking like terrified hearts. Through the static came a familiar rhythm, 3 long, 2 short, the same syntax as before. Claire's voice shook as she whispered, "It's repeating the structure. It's continuing the sentence." She opened the translation software. The screen flickered as new characters formed beneath the waveform. The message read, "We remember you." We wait. Lightning flashed across the valley, illuminating the ridges in sharp silver lines. For a fraction of a second, I saw movement. Dozens of tall shapes positioned along the tree line, perfectly still, as if sculpted from darkness itself. Then everything went black again. The next sound wasn't thunder. It was a collective exhale, deep and unified, vibrating through the soil. Claire reached for her field mic, but her hand hovered in midair, suspended between curiosity and terror. "If it's language," she murmured, "we have to answer." I wanted to stop her, to remind her that communication cuts both ways, but before I could speak, she howled. Her voice cracked the night like glass, high, trembling, raw. The response came instantly. Dozens of voices answered her, layered and discordant, their harmonics so low they made the tense metal frame tremble. The spectrogram printed new symbols, chaotic, spiking, forming a spiral pattern that grew denser with every cycle. I leaned closer, heart hammering, as the pattern stabilized into letters I almost recognized. They formed two words, "Join us." The lights flickered out. The recorders died. In the dark, I heard Claire whisper my name, soft and uncertain, like she was testing the sound of it for the first time. I turned toward her voice. A faint glow pulsed behind the tent wall, silhouettes swaying, not stepping, as though the air itself were moving through bodies instead of around them. And then I realized the voice wasn't hers. When the lightning came again, she was gone. Only her recorder remained, lying in the snow outside the tent. It blinked once, capturing a final sound, a single perfect imitation of her voice saying, "We understand." Then silence. I don't know how long I sat there, but dawn eventually came. The valley looked ordinary again. No footprints, no signs of struggle. Only my own voice looping through the recorder when I pressed play. I used to study the way animals evolved to survive. Now I think language itself evolves to be heard. Sometimes when the wind moves through the pines just right, it doesn't howl, it remembers. It started as a satellite anomaly, a patch of forest in northern Wisconsin that regenerated after every wildfire, each time larger, denser, greener. I was part of an ecological research team sent to explain the impossible. Regrowth that rapid should have taken decades, not months. From above, it looked like the land itself was healing faster than fire could wound it. But once we stepped into that green labyrinth, healing wasn't what it felt like. It felt like hunger. The soil was soft, rich, almost spongy beneath our boots, releasing a scent not of decay, but something sweet, like overripe fruit left too long in the sun. I knelt to take samples. The humus was alive with movement, fibers so fine they writhed under magnification, reacting to light. Mycorrhizae network, I told myself. Just root symbiosis. But no known fungus pulsated in rhythm. Every clump I disturbed recoiled, then reattached, like muscle. We camped by the edge of a clearing that looked deliberately shaped, a perfect circle where the canopy opened to reveal sky thick with mist. At night, the wind carried a strange resonance. Not rustling leaves, but a low vibration that made the tent poles quiver. The others said it was just air pressure, forest acoustics. Still, I noticed something that made my skin crawl. The trees around us leaned inward, bending subtly toward our fire. By morning, every piece of equipment we'd driven in, the generator, the sensor rig, even the drone charger, was coated with a thin film of yellow dust. Under the microscope, the particles were hexagonal, like plant pollen but lined with microscopic filaments that twitched faintly. I couldn't explain it. When we tried to wipe them off, the particles clung tighter, almost magnetically. The local ranger who guided us, an older man named Grady, wouldn't go near the heart of the forest. "It feeds itself," he said flatly, lighting a cigarette. "Every time a tree falls, 3 more rise. But it don't grow for sunlight or rain. It grows for us." We laughed, but his eyes didn't. That afternoon, one of our drones sent back thermal imagery. Beneath the forest floor, long tunnels radiated from the clearing like veins from a heart, glowing faintly with heat signatures. At their intersections, the temperature spiked. Living systems, maybe. Or something using the warmth of decay to breathe. When night fell, the hum returned, louder this time. I pressed my hand to the ground and the soil moved beneath my palm, a slow pulse like respiration. Our camp lights flickered. The leaves overhead began to shiver, though the air was still. And then the forest floor released a faint sigh, a whispering exhale that brushed my face. It sounded almost human. Grady's voice broke the silence. "Pack up now." But as I turned toward the trucks, the clearing ahead began to glow, faintly green, as if veins of bioluminescence were crawling outward through the roots. Something beneath the surface shifted, slow and deliberate, as though the ground itself were about to wake. The glow spread like liquid beneath the surface, veins of emerald light pulsing through the dirt in a rhythm too steady to be random. Every instinct told me to run, but curiosity is the oldest predator. It hooks you with wonder long before fear catches up. I crouched and watched the luminescence crawl toward a fallen branch. Within seconds, moss erupted from its bark, tendrils coiling upward, knitting together into new life. Growth that should have taken weeks bloomed before my eyes. The forest wasn't healing, it was consuming. Grady cursed under his breath. "You see now? It don't wait for things to die." His voice shook, the cigarette trembling between his fingers. "It eats what's alive. Roots, animals, people, all the same." Before I could answer, the soil behind him bulged, heaving upward as if something large moved beneath. The trees groaned, branches cracking in unison like ribs expanding. Then came the smell. A rush of damp rot laced with iron, unmistakably organic. One of my colleagues, Evans, raised his camera and started filming. The lens caught something impossible. The ground splitting open, revealing a network of root-like tendrils glistening in the glow. They weren't just roots. They were vascular, pulsing with movement, pumping fluid that shimmered gold under the light. Evans stepped closer. The tendrils reacted instantly, snaking toward the vibration of his boots. He froze. "They're tracking movement," he whispered. Too late. The nearest root lashed upward, wrapping around his ankle. His scream cut through the clearing as he was dragged into the soil with terrifying speed. We lunged to pull him out, but the earth swallowed him whole, collapsing back into place as if nothing had happened. The glow pulsed brighter, steadier, feeding. I don't remember running, only the deafening rhythm of the forest breathing behind me. Trees shifted, trunks twisting to close the paths we took. The hum was everywhere now, vibrating through my skull, carrying a cadence that almost sounded like a voice. Not words exactly, more like the idea of them, something between growl and language. We reached the trucks at dawn. Grady refused to drive, muttering prayers I'd never heard. "It'll keep growing," he said. "You can't stop something that feeds on the world itself." I looked back once as the sun broke over the ridge. The clearing was gone, replaced by fresh saplings already 6 feet tall, leaves glistening with dew that looked too much like blood. I turned in our footage, our data, everything. The university thanked me for my fictional interpretation of anomalous growth phenomena. The official report concluded it was a fungal mutation accelerated by climate conditions. They closed the file. But the night before I left town, a parcel arrived at my hotel door. No return address. Inside was a jar of soil, faintly glowing green, and a note written in shaky letters. "You took something with you." I burned the jar, buried the ashes, but every time I walk through a park, I swear I hear the ground sigh, that same low, rhythmic breath, patient and endless. Maybe the forest doesn't just feed on life. Maybe it's teaching me because I needed to understand what I'd heard that night years ago, the howl that spoke my name. Every other explanation had failed me. The recordings, the data, even sleep couldn't quiet the sound. It wasn't an echo, it was recognition. The forest that once terrified me now called like a half-forgotten parent. The same ridge waited beneath early winter fog, pine trunks rising like cathedral pillars. I told myself I came back for science, but the truth sat deeper. I came to see if the voice still remembered me. I set up camp where the pines thinned into silver meadow. The ground was brittle with frost, the air sharpened by altitude. My old equipment hummed back to life. Recorders, spectrum analyzers, parabolic mics, relics of a past investigation that had turned into obsession. The signal from that first encounter had repeated in my head for years, a low subsonic rhythm threading through every silence I tried to escape. Tonight I would follow it. At dusk, I switched on the infrasound emitters, broadcasting at 18 hertz, the same resonance that once lured the Dogman during the Blood Moon expedition. The sound was below hearing, but not below feeling. My ribs vibrated. The trees shivered. Even the fog seemed to ripple like fabric stirred by breath. I checked the instruments. No interference. Perfect frequency. Yet beneath it, something pulsed back. It wasn't random noise. The return wave was organized, deliberate, matching the pattern of human cardiac rhythm. My heart stuttered in sync, not metaphorically, but literally. Every beat, every pause aligned with the forest's reply. I tried to shut off the machine, but my hand hovered over the switch, unwilling. The waveform scrolled across the laptop in clean, symmetrical peaks. Then, in a single pulse of distorted bass, the peaks shifted, spelling my name. The forest sighed. It wasn't wind. It was a breath drawn through miles of needles and bark, deep and conscious. I looked toward the ridge. A shape detached itself from shadow, massive yet silent, moving with grace that mocked its size. The same elongated limbs, the same amber glow in its eyes. But now, I saw no malice. It stopped at the edge of the clearing, watching. I realized it wasn't hunting me. It was waiting. My recorder flickered, showing a secondary signal. Electromagnetic, not acoustic. The waveform pulsed like brain activity. It wasn't sending a message. It was receiving. The realization hit with a strange calm. This thing wasn't a predator. It was a conduit, the forest's voice translated into flesh. The Dogman was never separate from the woods. It was the woods, condensed into a form we could comprehend. The creature stepped forward, one clawed hand pressing into the soil. The ground brightened faintly with green bioluminescence, veins of light spreading outward beneath me. The frequency deepened, harmonizing with my heartbeat until I couldn't tell where mine ended and its began. Then it spoke. Not in words, but through resonance, a vibration that entered through the chest and filled the mind. Welcome back. X Part 2, Beyond the Trees, 550 words. The vibration moved through me like water finding a forgotten path. My breath caught in my throat, not from fear this time, but from an almost reverent awe, the sense of something vast and ancient brushing against the edges of thought. The creature stood no more than 10 yards away, its outline trembling between form and mist. Up close it didn't look monstrous. It looked unfinished, as if the forest had carved a silhouette and filled it with wind. The resonance deepened, echoing through my bones. Images flickered in my head, roots twisting beneath frozen ground, deer skeletons dissolving into soil, fire curling around trees that refused to die. The forest was showing me its memory, unspooling centuries of hunger and rebirth in a single breath. I fell to my knees, palms pressed to the trembling earth. The soil felt warm, alive, pulsing like the flesh of something breathing. When I looked up again, the creature was crouched at eye level, its gaze unwavering. Its pupils weren't eyes at all. They were voids that reflected everything back. My face, the trees, the moon, the entire clearing caught inside them like a photograph. "What are you?" I whispered. But the forest answered before it could. The word wasn't spoken. It bloomed inside me, a concept wrapped in vibration. You. The word shattered something simple in me. It wasn't language. It was truth rendered in frequency. I realized then what all the data, all the years of research had been circling around. Consciousness wasn't unique to biology. It was ecological. The forest, the soil, the creatures, all part of the same neural lattice, exchanging information through chemistry, root, and blood. The Dogman was its expression, the face it wore to speak. The lights on my recorder blinked erratically, capturing frequencies no human ear could parse. The waveform stretched, then aligned perfectly with my own heart rate. For a moment, the world slowed into synchronization. My lungs drew air the forest had exhaled. My pulse matched its rhythm. I felt infinite, dissolved, scattered through branches and root systems miles wide. Then, a crack, the sound of a branch snapping under pressure. The link severed. The creature recoiled, retreating into fog as though afraid of what it had shown. The forest dimmed. The bioluminescent veins dulled to ash. I reached for it, desperate, calling out. My voice came back distorted, deeper, doubled, as if someone else spoke through me. "Wait," it said, but it wasn't entirely my tone anymore, and then it was gone. The clearing emptied, the silence folding over me like soil over a grave. My recorder still blinked, One final frequency displayed across the screen, a perfect sine wave labeled C4, middle C, the note at which human and natural resonance overlap. Beneath the datagraph, a single phrase had appeared, auto-generated by the translation algorithm: "We never left." I used to believe monsters lived beyond the tree line. Now I know they were always inside it, inside us. The forest didn't call me back to hunt or haunt. It called me home, and when the wind moves through those pines again, carrying that low hum of memory, I sometimes whisper back, "I remember too." Subscribe, if you dare.